People see this church and call it God's blessing. They don't know what it cost to build it. In this world, money is power, and power makes people blind. Every time they called us blessed, I heard the voices of the people we destroyed.
My husband stopped praying. He stopped sleeping. And one day, I realized he had stopped telling the truth.
Money leaves footprints, and these footprints lead straight to the church.
What would you do if you discovered that your pastor's biggest donors were criminals? Do you think Pastor Jeremiah was a victim of greed or a willing participant? Can dirty money ever build something holy? Stay with us and decide for yourself and share your opinion in the comments. Do you think Pastor Jeremiah was a victim of greed or a willing participant?
The megachurch is shown as a place of success, luxury, and public admiration. A powerful pastor arrives and is celebrated like a celebrity, while a group of wealthy young men also receive attention because of their money. Among them, a quieter young man begins to feel uneasy, suggesting early signs of doubt beneath the surface of celebration. The church service is presented as highly energetic and emotionally charged with worship, preaching, and public offering displays. Wealth is openly celebrated as a sign of blessing. While most people are excited and convinced, one young man becomes increasingly uncomfortable, silently questioning the morality behind what he is witnessing. The narrative reveals the hidden truth behind the wealth. The same young men who are honored in church are shown engaging in online fraud, emotionally harming victims across the world. The leader remains calm and detached, while the younger member struggles with guilt, showing a growing moral conflict within the group. A private meeting shows the connection between the church and questionable money sources. Large financial contributions are exchanged and justified as church support. Although concerns about public suspicion are raised, both sides ignore the moral implications, revealing a silent agreement built on mutual benefit rather than truth. At home, the pastor's wife begins to notice emotional distance and unexplained wealth. She questions the source of their sudden prosperity but receives no clear answers. This scene introduces suspicion within the family and shows the beginning of personal trust breaking down. A detective begins investigating unusual financial patterns, linking the church to foreign victims of fraud. Despite lack of full proof, he recognizes a clear pattern of corruption. He receives a mysterious lead that pushes the investigation deeper into the church system, confirming that the case is serious. The pastor is shown alone in the empty church, reflecting on his choices and feeling growing guilt. A message about future financial gain arrives, reinforcing that the cycle of corruption continues. He realizes he is losing control, but is already too deep to escape easily. The church is now more famous and powerful, attracting larger crowds and media attention. The young men connected to wealth are openly celebrated as symbols of success. However, beneath the celebration, tension begins to grow as one of them feels trapped and questions the meaning of their lifestyle. The church service becomes even more intense, with preaching focused on success and blessing. Wealthy supporters are given special honor, reinforcing the idea that money equals divine approval. While most people are fully convinced, internal discomfort grows in one young man who begins to see cracks in the system. The hidden reality of fraud is shown more clearly as the group continues deceiving victims online. The leader remains emotionally detached and focused on profit, while the younger member becomes increasingly disturbed by the suffering caused. The moral conflict inside the group deepens. The connection between the church and questionable money becomes more tense. Church leaders receive large financial support from the group, but concerns about public suspicion begin to rise. Despite this, both sides continue the arrangement, choosing silence over truth to protect their success. The investigation intensifies as a detective connects financial evidence to a larger fraud network linked to the church. Even though direct proof is still limited, the pattern becomes clearer. A new lead pushes the case forward, suggesting internal information may soon be exposed. The pastor's wife grows increasingly suspicious of their sudden wealth and emotional distance within the home. She confronts the pastor, demanding answers about the source of their lifestyle. The pastor avoids the truth, deepening mistrust and emotional separation in the family. A victim of the fraud begins a personal investigation after losing everything. She discovers traces linking the scammers to a larger network and begins identifying suspects. This marks the beginning of her transformation from victim to seeker of justice. A hidden confrontation takes place as secret recording and surveillance uncover the dangerous truth. The sense of betrayal increases as someone realizes they are being watched or exposed. The stolen recording disappears, showing that the system is protecting itself from exposure. A sudden death outside a luxury nightclub signals that the world around the fraud network is becoming more violent. The police treat it as a professional killing, suggesting a deeper criminal system behind the scenes. Fear begins to spread as it becomes clear that the money game is now connected to bloodshed. Inside a luxury penthouse, the news of death is treated with emotional distance by the group. The leader remains calm and unbothered, while fear grows in the younger member, who starts to question the consequences of their lifestyle. The tone shifts from wealth to danger as survival becomes uncertain. The church begins to lose its peaceful image as public doubt and anger grow. During service, a confrontation breaks out when members openly question the connection between the church and criminal activity. For the first time, the congregation shows fear instead of blind faith. The investigation becomes more serious as financial records and evidence continue to link fraud victims to church-related accounts. The detective becomes more confident that powerful people are involved. However, the main suspect disappears, making the case more difficult and dangerous. A direct confrontation reveals tension between the pastor and the fraud leader. The pastor expresses fear as the situation becomes uncontrollable, while the leader reminds him that the entire system depends on their cooperation. Power begins to shift, and the pastor loses control over what he helped build. A victim seeking justice begins to connect herself directly to one of the suspects. She gains emotional strength as she transforms from helpless victim into active investigator. A new alliance forms quietly, suggesting that exposure of the network is becoming possible. A detective uncovers hidden financial documents, proving the involvement of top church leadership in illegal money transfers. The discovery confirms that corruption is not accidental but structured. However, the investigator is discovered, increasing danger and tension. The final collapse begins during a live church service when police storm the building. Panic erupts as authority intervenes in front of the entire congregation. Gunfire and chaos break out, marking the full exposure of the hidden criminal system behind the church. The story enters a national crisis as the church scandal becomes public knowledge across media platforms. News outlets broadcast shocking reports of fraud, corruption, and investigations. The image of the church shifts from respected institution to national controversy, spreading fear, anger, and disbelief across the country. The church is now broken and abandoned in public perception, surrounded by journalists, protesters, and angry former members. People express betrayal and emotional pain over what they once believed in. The pastor's wife arrives and faces public questioning, showing how deeply the scandal has affected personal lives and reputation. One of the younger members is placed under protection as a witness, living in isolation and emotional guilt. He struggles with memories of the past and the consequences of his actions. This scene highlights regret, trauma, and the psychological cost of being involved in the corruption, the criminal leader is now in hiding, surrounded by fear and uncertainty as law enforcement closes in. Trust within the group collapses as suspicion of betrayal grows. The once powerful figure begins to lose control, showing that power built on crime is unstable. The investigation intensifies as authorities gather stronger evidence and track hidden financial networks. However, key suspects are missing or evading capture, creating pressure on the detective. The case is now a national priority, but justice is still incomplete. The pastor's wife publicly speaks about the truth behind the church's rise and fall. Her emotional confession reveals internal corruption and moral failure at the highest level. This moment shifts public understanding and confirms that the system was built on greed and deception. The pastor and his wife meet in emotional silence and pain, reflecting on the destruction of their lives and reputation. The pastor expresses regret while acknowledging his choices, and his wife confronts him with painful honesty. This scene represents accountability, loss, and broken trust. The criminal leader escapes into isolation but continues to plan revenge, showing that danger is not fully eliminated. Meanwhile, law enforcement closes in from all sides, signaling that the final confrontation is approaching. The world of crime does not end cleanly, but continues to linger in shadow. The final phase of the story begins at a crowded court complex where the entire nation gathers to witness justice. Media, protesters, and victims all come together, showing how far the scandal has spread. The once powerful church leader is now brought forward under heavy security, marking the full collapse of his status and influence. Inside the courtroom, truth is forced into the open as the pastor confesses to his involvement in financial crimes. The atmosphere is heavy with shock, pain, and disbelief as former followers, investigators, and victims face the reality of what happened. This moment confirms the complete exposure of the system built on deception. Outside the courtroom, survivors and former participants confront the emotional consequences of their actions. The young witness expresses deep regret, while a victim seeks answers and emotional closure. This scene shows that even after truth is revealed, healing and forgiveness remain difficult. The criminal leader is now in hiding, continuing to operate from the shadows while refusing to accept defeat. He remains dangerous and unrepentant, planning further escape and retaliation. This shows that even after public judgment, criminal influence can still survive in hidden spaces. Law enforcement intensifies the final pursuit as evidence is gathered to track remaining fugitives. The detective becomes fully focused on capturing the mastermind behind the entire network. Although progress is made, the final arrest is still not complete, keeping tension alive. The pastor is shown in isolation, fully stripped of power, wealth, and reputation. He reflects on his choices and accepts emotional responsibility for the damage caused. This scene represents personal judgment, where consequences are no longer external but internal and spiritual. A final confrontation unfolds at the marina as the criminal leader attempts escape while law enforcement closes in. Tension rises as truth, justice, and survival collide. The moment symbolizes the last resistance of a collapsing criminal empire. The story ends in silence and reflection as the pastor lives out his punishment in prison. The atmosphere is calm but heavy with regret and consequence. The final message emphasizes that truth eventually prevails and every action leads to judgment, completing the moral arc of the entire story.
And every person, no matter how powerful, eventually faces judgment. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe to African Folktale by Zoya. Turn on the notification so when I post more interesting stories, you will be the first to get them. I really appreciate you. I do not take your support for granted. Bye for now.